I know you see me, but y'all should be used to me doing these dark videos, so I'm not even about to trip about that. And if y'all still tripping about it, go ahead. So I'm gonna put this thing up really quick, and then I'm gonna jump into the topic because it's been on my mind most of the day. I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it. Share my thoughts. Give y'all something interesting to think about. Nothing to be, in your feelings about, but just something to think about. I'm sure you got a lot to think about already, but this will be just something different to think about. Something different to think about. I'm curious to see what people are gonna jump on in their videos and be messing with their window. It's so interesting to see people do that. But it lets me know who is involved with the craft, because why would you be doing that, prophetess? Why would you be mirroring me like I see the witches do? Anywho, it could be influence. There was a girl that I seen in a compilation who told me to be mindful that I can't be mad because I'm influential. We'll say it's influence, but some of them are doing it because they mess with the craft. But anywho, I didn't come to talk about that, okay? What I've been thinking about throughout the day and just kind of sorting through is, what do all of these exposures say about us as a community or as a body, as a nation, right? What do all of these exposures say about us? And what I mean by that, right, is we have learned and discovered some very interesting things about some people that some of us once did and some of us still hold to a high esteem, right? There have been lots of information come out. There have been, some people saying some new things, some people not saying new things at all, but they're just, pawns in the big scheme of things, right? How you doing? And so I was really sitting here thinking, like, for all of these things to have had the time, space, and opportunity to take place behind the scenes while we were enjoying all of the entertainment or participating in some of it, going to all of these festivals and celebrating these different people. And I genuinely do not believe that there is anything wrong with celebrating people, right? I think people should be celebrated. Hi, everyone. I think people should be celebrated, and I think that, there's nothing wrong with telling people that they did good with something, blah, 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 right? But on the flip side of all of the things, right, because there were a lot of crazy things revealed, especially the trafficking thing will always be something that is just up there, right? Because for some people, for organization, for groups to be able to do that, that means that there are many, many, many hands and parts of that system for that to be the case, right? There has to be many parts, hands, people who may be your neighbor, your doctors. You just never really know who's all a part of that group, right? I know just personally for myself, being someone that has been gang stalked or watched, I know thankfully I was able to see some things early, right? And God allowed me to see those things and help me to navigate those things, right? Showed me how to move, how not to move, right? But there are a lot of people who get involved in dark things easily, right? And typically the only thing that they need to encourage them to do so is money. And I was sitting here thinking about this topic, like, what do these exposures expose about us? And I was also thinking about that, but I was flipping through and doing some of my prayer Bible. And some of the spiritual attacks in my prayer Bible, one of the attacks is financial embarrassment, right? And when I was looking at some of the scriptures given to combat that area of attack, right? It talks about contentment, right? Being content and understanding that uh contentment is great gain, right? Somebody else was talking about that earlier because they were highlighting how this strange woman that came out of the blue at this church, her first talk was about she didn't want to serve God broke, right? And so the person who I heard, I believe he's a pastor, but it was a pastor talking about this other lady's that's a wife now of a pastor, and he was highlighting how contentment is great gain, and that was one of the scriptures that I highlighted while doing the financial embarrassment attack, right? I believe we as a body view things the way we do because we have allowed people, whether they were given to us or whether we put them on those pedestals, right? We have allowed them to make us believe that you are only successful if it looks a certain way, right? And we have allowed them to tell us that this group of people we should celebrate because they have the success that looks a certain way, right? This group of people should be able to only get a slap on the wrist when they do things that need to be serious lockdown, right? But because they have the money or because they have the perceived success or because whatever they established or built or created holds all of this weight, that they can just, bribe somebody and see if the bribe will stick, right? But the Bible also talks about that judges are not to take bribes, right? They're not to um show favoritism to the rich and not to the poor, right? The Bible talks about that as well, unfair judges, okay? And as I was sitting here pondering on this topic, right? What do these exposures expose about us? One of the other things that came to me was how sadly some of us are very easily swayed. And what I mean by that is people feel like if the person is the loudest or the most consistent or the most persistent, right? Because demons are persistent. People with demons in them are very persistent and consistent, and they show up and they pop up and they make sure that they're in the right photos and the right places with the right people so they can be seen and noticed, right? They want to be seen and noticed, right? But sometimes they want to do it under the radar, or sometimes they don't want to do it on the radar. They want to do it on purpose because they know that they have gotten hooks in the minds of so many people. And when I say minds, I really mean souls, right? Because the Bible talks about how we're to guard our heart, mind, and soul because they work as a unit, right? Your mind is part of your soul. And the fact that there's a group of people in society today who feel or know that they can do all types of crazy things, and because of their status and their money, right? Because America was built off capitalism, right? Not faith, not anything that has a firm foundation, which is why we're now seeing America go through what it's going through now, right? Babylon is falling because it wasn't built on a firm foundation. It was built on mammon, sacrifice, blood, the shedding of innocent blood, right? We see a lot of people now who people may still do. I don't know. I don't keep up with the people that most people hold on high. But I don't keep up with people. And the reason I don't keep up with people like that is because God says he's not a respecter of person. I think that's another reason that we as a society have been exposed also in a way when you think about it, right? I'm not saying we hold the responsibility for some of these people choosing to do some of the things that they participated in, but at the same time, I am also saying that the fact that all of this can go on under our noses, or the fact that there are people you may or may not know who willingly choose to participate in some of these things just because they want the foundation of saying, I have accumulated all this wealth. And as I was doing my prayer Bible, one of the things that also popped up to me when it came to like financial embarrassment or anything like that was the reminder that we can accumulate all these things, but we can't take them to the grave with us. They can't go with us when we die. And society, the churches, right? All they talk about is prosperity, prosperity, prosperity. And they don't ever really go into the deep meat of the word where it says contentment is in itself is great gain, right? They focus on is great gain. They want you to have the big numbers. They want you to have they want to have the wealth like Meshledek and all of these other people, right? Solomon. And it talks about also in scripture how people who are wealthy or who experience that level of wealth, right? It opens doors for them to be open to different types of lust and deceit and different things like that. And we're seeing that a lot in the pulpits with some of the people that are so-called leaders, right? We see that in them because they are who the word is talking about when it talks about the people who they are part of them, right? Because they aren't the only ones in that message, right? But they are included in those who acquire all of this wealth, and then they're open to all of this different deceit. That's why you see a lot of these celebrity pastors and different things like that, and they're saying all of these crazy things, and it's like, well, where is this coming from? They already opened up the door to certain things, right? When you think about some pastors and you realize that some of the affiliations that they have, some of the people they've opened their doors to have on their podcast or different things like that, and you see the things that the people that they open on their doors to be on their podcast, you see the behaviors and the things that they're talking about, but it's like, how did you touch or impact that person? Like, how did you even establish that connection with that type of individual, and they were not impacted by the so-called light or anointing that you claim to have on your life in a way that shifted them or impacted them in a good way? Whether people want to see it as so or not, the exposure on the very people that a lot of us, and I say a lot of us because there are some people whose work I still like, right? I still, some songs they're just classics. You love them, right? Or some movies, some TV shows, whatever the case may be, some community leaders or different things like that, right? Because the exposure was everywhere. It went in all directions, all facets, politics, right? These people who have held the stage, who have held these platforms, who have been put in front of us as the people that we should imitate and idolize and worship and all of these different things, the exposure concerning their darkness also sheds light on where we as a body or as a community have also been exposed in a way. I know it sounds crazy, and I'm not saying that for us to have any extra weight on us, right? I know there's a lot of things going on in the world already, and this is not a conversation for people to feel weighed down about. It's just simply something to think about. And maybe I'm in a mental space where I can separate and do that. I hope those listening are also in a place where they can separate and do that as well, and not feel like I'm attacking them, because that's not the intent at all. I'm genuinely having a conversation. Like, the exposure exposes us as well. And I'm not saying that for anybody in any position that was once idolized or publicized, right? I'm not saying that for them to then manipulate what I'm saying, right? For their benefit or for their gain even more, right? But to an extent, just like the people who surrounded all of these different people who were being exposed for the crazy things that they did, the people around them were enablers, right? To a certain extent, we may have blindly enabled a lot of these activities. Does that mean we have the same blood on our hands? Because of our association, our affiliation, our desire to be connected to, sing with, or whatever the case may be, with certain people, does that mean that we also have the same blood on our hands? Some of these people have shed innocent blood, which is why there's a curse on this land as is. Allegedly. But according to what God gave me to give as a prophecy that I've given before in one of my videos, I don't know which exact one it is, but I know it's a video or live on my page that talks about it. The innocent blood that shed is because they were shedding innocent blood, killing these babies, these Planned Parenthood. I know everybody's not gonna like me saying that, but it's the truth. Planned Parenthood. I'm not saying if you've been raped or something like that. I feel like that's slightly different. Other people who may have had their babies from that type of situation might say different, right? Maybe they were able to do it. Everybody might not be able to do that. But that's a tangent. Slightly. But, excuse me. Does this exposure also expose us? Does it expose the mentality behind a society where we're able to look past or look over things and move on quickly from it, but just because of status, right? Does this expose society in a way where we have put gain on a pedestal more than we put God? And I can see why, because most of the churches are prosperity. I can't say all of the churches, but a good chunk of the churches that go viral or do other different things like that, prosperity is their leading message. That's the foundation they built their church on, prosperity. You hear all your pastors talking about, oh, I had a business, I did that, I did this, I did all they're talking about is prosperity. They're not talking about contentment. They don't talk about contentment being great gain. They're saying, oh, you need to have XYZ, right? Mind you, we're living in a time where a lot of people don't have XYZ. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to cope with not having X, Y, and Z. And the pastors are still in the pulpit begging y'all to give amounts of tithes for the church. They know a lot of people don't have it. But some of these pastors don't care because they just need it for themselves. And then now, because of all of these exposures, right, the thing is, oh, now you're automatically a hater. No, you're not automatically a hater. Just because you are pointing out something wrong that some people are doing, and then they're calling it, oh, you're just a hater. No, I think you're just using the hater thing because you dislike the truth of what someone is saying. Some things are definitely shade, very much so, but every no. And going to churches where pastors can really get up in that pulpit and do a straight face lie, and then tell you that you can't, basically try to tell you that you can't say nothing to them. When it's supposed to be checks and balances in the church anyway, for the pastors to not even get to that point. These exposures expose us. They do. They expose society. They expose society. It was interesting because one of the other things that I realized these exposures expose, right, is a lot of the people who are possibly involved or were involved in the exposures, right, they operate under the belief that power also looks a certain way. They operate that power looks a certain way. Maybe not now, I don't know. But they operate under the guise that power looks a certain way, power sounds a certain way, power has certain things, right? And then when you look at God and the people he used, not all of them, but a good bit of the people that he used, they don't look anything. They don't have some of the things that these people believe that power should have. There's people who look at my life or God's hand in my life, and they're trying to figure out or wonder why me. And the crazy part is, it's not me. It's God that's walking with me, that's strengthening me, that's using me. These people who believe that power looks a certain way, walks a certain way, talks a certain way, right? They also believe that they're probably also just as confused, right? Because the power that they know and the power that God may be using me to exhibit don't look the same. These are people who had to sacrifice all types of things that maybe they can or may not ever truly speak on, right? Maybe they've already spoke on them, but they know that telling you, what is it going to do? I listened to someone who I said a long time ago was a controlled opposition. And it was a clip of this person saying, you can't handle the truth. And I was tickled when I heard it. One, because I knew from jump that that person was controlled opposition. But two, it made me question, if you genuinely feel like people cannot handle the truth, what have you been telling them this whole time? For a person who has, quote unquote, been a truth teller, right, exposing certain groups, we'll say, for them to have a moment where their mask fully slipped and they get on camera and they say, you can't handle the truth, in their therapy voice, which is so fitting considering, but anywho, you can't handle the truth. What if they've been telling you the whole time if they feel like their audience cannot handle the truth? And even that in itself exposes society even more, right? Because how is it that we get so hooked onto listening to people who are actively playing the same game with the same people whose major interest is keeping your mind hooked on the bait that they dangle in front of you, while also claiming not to be one of those people? Like, how? How do we get here? How do we get to the place where we have become respecter of people, so much so when God was never a respecter of person? They set the foundation on capitalism, not on God, on capitalism. God said he's not a respecter of person. They also built it on being a respecter of person, right? You have to respect this person because, well, their title means you need to respect them. This is what they teach us. What they've taught us for some of us who have, we're a little older now. They teach us that if you respect this person, then doors will open for you. If you kiss this person's behind, then another door will open for you. If you sit on this couch and have this conversation and go through the right door, then other doors will open for you. A respecter of person. If you say the right thing, if you join our club, the he man, she man, it man, the man, I don't know if it's a man or if it's a lady man club. If you join this club, right, doors will open for you. They have created society to be, excuse me, respect their persons. They built it on capitalism, so they painted success to look only one way when the Bible tells us that contentment is great gain, right? Being happy with what you have so you're able to then get more, right? You're able to steward more when God decides that more is there for you to have, right? And we know, of course, you can work to have more and abundance and all of these different things. So we know that. Of course we know that. The difference is society has hooked people so much so on being focused on capitalism, right? Looking at all of the shiny people, looking at the people who have it, whatever it may be, so much so to where we worship them so much to now it's like, for some people it feels weird to even question them, to even doubt them, to even consider that maybe they really are willing to do those dark things for gain. There's suffering on either side. I've said that before multiple times too. But what I've suffered didn't cost a life per se, right? Some people look at my life and they say, oh, will it cost you your life? And in a sense, yeah, it did, right? My family connections have drastically changed, probably will just be changed, right? Relationships with people I thought were my friends changed, yeah. Just simple connections, period, or associations, period, have changed. Yeah, that cost me something. but it didn't cost me. What do I mean by that? Certain doors cost you. And when you walk through those doors, you're never really truly you. Again, you become someone else or something else. It's never Jasmine King. I'm just throwing out a name. I don't even know who Jasmine King. I'm throwing out a name. So if that's your name, I'm not talking about you, okay? But if you want to pretend like I am, whatever. But I'm not talking about you. If you are Jasmine King, I'm making up a name, okay? But you'll never be that person again. And we kind of see that to a certain extent. People drastically change. They become something completely different. Even me, when I think about my walk or my journey or my faith, I have become different in a way where I feel like I've grown more in love with myself versus becoming someone that may be hard to look at, right? What I mean by that is I think it would have been hard for me to look at who I could have been had I allowed all of these different things to taint me deeply, right? Had I allowed any of these things to taint me deeply, I think I probably would have had a hard time loving on myself as I'm still able to do today. Today, I can still proudly say that I'm able to love on myself and I can look in the mirror and smile and be like, oh, I know who that person is, right? Yes, I've changed. Yes, some things about me have had to change. But I can still look in the mirror and say, I love who I've become. And I'm not saying this trying to be shady or anything like that. I'm being serious. The things that people went out of their way to do, trying to get a certain reaction from me or out of me, is really crazy. Especially being that people still do it today, right? It's so very interesting. But they still do it today. What does this have to do with these things exposing us? Because most of us, whether we see it or not, are respecters of person. Our respect for people calls us to shift or change ourselves in order for the people that we so-called respect to view us in a certain light. Does that make sense? So because we have not built our own self-esteem on not being a respecter of person, right? In the sense of you can look at somebody else and know that they are human like you, even though that's questionable today, right? Everybody may not be human. Okay, whatever. Some people are admitting that there is something else. I would just take their word for it. Even if they're joking, I would look at them sideways at this point because how prove it. But um, anyway, I don't know where that laugh came from, but I didn't gain that laugh. I never used to do that, but whatever. Um, when you think about it from the aspect of being a respecter of person, right? When you are a respecter of person, you're more willing to shift or adjust yourself or tweak yourself because I rebuke it, Lord. The spirit of deep sleep, I rebuke it. When you are a respecter of person, you're more willing to tweak yourself because you want the people that you respect to also look at you and respect you or give you praise, right? Because you value the opinion of said person, whoever it may be, so much that you're willing to tweak yourself for their praises, for them to be like, oh yeah, I see you, or whatever the case may be, right? Whether they fully acknowledge you or whether they pretend like they don't see you, whatever the case may be, because it could be a lot of cases. Whatever the case may be, right? Uh, that happens when you respect a person. Enablers enable because of one or two things. Either they fear the person that they're enabling or bilk you. They fear the person that they are enabling, or they respect the person so much so that they're willing and open to do whatever because of that respect, right? And it's interesting when you think about it, because that type of respect is supposed to be saved for God. That's the respect that God wants from us, right? He wants us to have the respect of person that we have for man. He wants us to respect him that way. That's kind of good. He wants us to respect him in the same way that we have respect for these people, sometimes more than ourselves. That's what God wants. He wants us to respect him so much that we fear doing something that's going to not get praises from him, right? But I was really sitting there thinking about that. Like, these exposures expose us as a society. We don't have to agree. We don't have to do anything but think about it if you choose to. You don't even have to think about it if you don't want to. But when you really sit and think about, you think about it, the people who got in the bed or aided in the bed at some of these things that got exposed these past few years, how were they able to do that? And it's been because of the foundation or the system that's been set in play. I was briefly looking at something, and I need to go back and see what's become of it. But it was basically talking about how someone knew they were basically giving crack to millions of people, and they still did it anyway. Yeah, I'm talking about this social media stuff, right? A person admitted to basically giving people crack. They admitted that they knew it was going to be addictive. That's like turning someone into a drug addict on purpose. Getting someone strung out on purpose. You intentionally turn millions of people into addicts. Do you know the type of crime drug dealers can get? It's the same thing to admitting you're a drug dealer. And we're just like, oh, we'll keep taking the drug. I don't know why I keep coming back to it. I really be having those conversations lately with myself concerning getting on, scrolling on these apps on YouTube. I literally be having that conversation like, why am I here? Why am I scrolling on this thing? But then to hear somebody say they knowingly put stuff in the algorithm, or they put stuff in the program for it to intentionally get people addicted to it, that's like admitting to, yeah, I knew it was crack. Yeah, I knew it was dope. Yeah, I knew it was fentanyl. I gave it to him anyway. I knew it was fentanyl. I gave it to him anyway. Don't drug dealers get hard time? How do you admit to pushing the biggest overdose on not just a little neighborhood, the world, billions of people, and you admit that, yeah, I sent this out to everybody on purpose. What does this exposure expose about us as a society? How do we get out of this place? How do we create a better place? There's been talk about creating a better God, but it's already been hacked. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand how do we get here and how do we get out? And what if the only way out is through? What if the only way out is through? Then what? It was just something I was thinking about earlier. Like, being a respecter of person and trying to build a foundation on mammon. And the two combined, especially in church, is dangerous. I think it's a little bit expected in the world, but in God's house, when the Levite is supposed to be humble, I, when the Levite is supposed to be sharing their portion with the widow, the fatherless, and you know those people, the Levite is supposed to share their portion with them. The Levite used to stay at the church. Do you hear me? They used to stay at the church. They didn't have mansions outside the church. They lived at the church. They lived at the church. How are you doing? Some of these people, I don't know. I was thinking about that though. Like, what does the exposure expose about us? And how do we as a community change, tweak, those things for the better? I know I done yawned a couple times and my eyes getting heavy. But usually when I start talking long, start yawning and stuff. But Father, excuse me. I'm gonna see if I can get right before I get left, you know. I like saying that. But yeah. This isn't a judgment thing. This is just something I was thinking about. Like, this exposure exposes us as a society. The fact that these people were able to even be in a space where they're comfortable doing some of those things and then still turning around and wanting praise and worship from man and reiterating that back in society to where they're proud to flaunt that they knowingly influence you, and sometimes knowingly influencing you to your detriment. Is just like creating a program where you know it's going to be addictive, quite like a drug, and you admit that you were a drug dealer and then getting upset when you get drug dealer time. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are some others, but that's kind of like the main thing. I'm getting out of here because my eyes are heavy. But yeah, this is not a judgment. It's an observation. It's a thought piece. It's just something for us to ponder on. Like, how do we, where do we go from here? Especially for those who have realized that they want to be out of the charades game that's playing, right? It's a whole lot of stuff going on because they're trying to push other stuff behind the scenes, right? Because they want you to be baby makers, right? Just like in the Matrix where they had those sacks plugged up to the Matrix. They want you to continue to reproduce because, well, then it's like produce for them, right? Then they get to rejoice and celebrate in your actual labor for them not to have to labor. You know what I mean? They want to celebrate the fact that you are laboring and that what you are birthing is also going to be able to labor for them while they continue to make sure this land stays cursed. And then building on the cursed foundation, the wrong foundation, and wondering why it's collapsing. Just something to think about. It's not a judgment or anything like that. It's just a call or thought piece for us to figure out what can we do to get different results in our community as a nation. They've told us everything they wanted to tell us to keep us in a slumber or to keep us on this hamster wheel, right? Going round and round and round and round and round the same hamster wheel. Just like how the enemy attacks, it's the same thing. The same things, the same things, the same things, the same things. Maybe slightly different or maybe a new face he's using. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's the same thing. If you have mastered this one thing, okay, they're going to try it again, different time. But it's the same thing. It's like he on loop with whatever he doing. We could change it, of course, but just something to think about. Just something to think about. But to those of you who joined, thank you for popping in, commenting in chat. Thank you for the likes. Hope everyone has a great night. And yeah, keep pushing. Keep standing. Love you later. Deuces.